I said going into this week, if they got at least a second round pick for Ryan Lindgren, I would be happy. I got a second round pick. I am content.
And
That is all I reasonably could ask for someone who's probably better suited for second or third pair work. He's probably going to end up playing on the third pair in Colorado. And it's unfortunate because I understand why the organization valued his traits because they're not a very physical team. They're not a very gritty team. I understand that. Anytime you get a prospect as a throw-in effectively in a trade and you get NHL games out of them, that's a win for you. You know, I vividly remember waking up the day of that trade, waiting around all day. That trade came in pretty late in the day, if I remember correct. No, I woke up to the Rick Nash trade. The Rick Nash trade went through on a Saturday, and they woke up on a Sunday and thinking, okay, I see what they're trying to do. They're going for volume. They are going to get as many picks and prospects in here over the next handful of years as they can, and whoever sticks. And they got 3 good seasons out of Lindgren, and the wheels came off. It happens. This is a brutal sport. He's not the most physical guy. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. He played like it. He tried.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that was his own undoing, trying to play through injuries, come back from injuries too soon. As much as we bemoan that as being selfish to a certain point where, yeah, I got to help the team, but are you actually helping the team if you're limping out there and can't really move and you can't really handle the puck all that well to begin with? So there's a lot of layers to unpack here, but this is objectively the right decision because it's very simple. What's more valuable, the second and fourth round pick Pärssinen or Ryan Lindgren's 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 seasons? Because at minimum, he's going to be looking for a 5 or 6 year deal in free agency this summer. And that number of that contract is going to start at least 5.5, if not 6, if we're because we got to account for the increase in the cap that's going to happen over the next handful of years. So someone like Lindgren, who in this flat cap market is probably worth about 3.5 in actual value. You add the unrestricted free agency tax of about $1 million to $1.5 million. You add the cap going up increase part of it, the inflation of it, and you're very easily looking at a 5 or 6 year deal worth at least $5.5 to $6 million per year. And the Rangers had the good sense to realize that's a bad idea for us. We shouldn't do that.
I'm glad. And the thing about this, too, that we have to think about is if the Rangers were smart, especially in the last 2 years, where they saw Ryan Lindgren's play essentially dwindle, for lack of a better way to say this. Like Lindgren, when he first got to the Rangers, he was a really solid defenseman that brought not only the physicality, but was able to defend good opponents to a good degree. The last 2 seasons, he has not been able to do that. If the Rangers were smarter about this, they would have stapled Lindgren to the third pairing and essentially lowered, his responsibilities, sheltered him a little bit, and also in turn, if they really valued his locker room skill set and all of these things, you could still have that while playing Ryan Lindgren less minutes and not giving him the top of the top opponents to play against every single night. And also while doing that, you make his UFA ask lower because, instead of, Ryan Lindgren seeing himself as a top pairing defenseman that plays 20, 25 minutes a night. Okay. So he's playing bottom pair minutes with, Borgen, Vakanainen, whoever, he's paired with, who's playing sheltered minutes. He's playing better. He doesn't get nearly as much as of the ire. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get as much of the money, sure. And someone is going to overpay for Ryan Lindgren. Maybe it's Nashville because they love doing that to guys that have a good resume, but not players that can maybe help them out currently. But like they didn't do that. So instead, they did the absolute right thing by trading Ryan Lindgren while the iron is hot. He would have walked, and we were talking about this last season when the Rangers gave him a 1-year deal. That told you everything you needed to know about how they felt about Ryan Lindgren. Because if they were gung-ho on keeping him, if they really wanted to...
I mean, look what they did with Borgen. They had a week. Yeah, they had like 3 weeks of Borgen, and they're like, yeah, we want him 5 years.
If... It's one of those situations where like if they really want you, like let them show it to you.
Yeah.
Like if it, like they can text you back.
Yeah.
The Rangers could have texted Ryan Lindgren back at any moment. Throughout the offseason, throughout the beginning of the season, they chose not to do that. So that gave you all the information you needed that Ryan Lindgren was done as a Ranger. Whenever that would have happened, and it happened to be a few days ago, that this was going to be the last season of him in a Rangers jersey. Jimmy Vesey, but he was good for what he provided,
Yeah.
but the Rangers just needed the space for Othman and Berard and and these guys, and there's just not enough space for Vesey, and off he goes, and that's he was a good Ranger here for for what he was supposed to do in his role. He was fine at it. Yeah, like there's no complaints about him, and sorry to see him go. The second round pick was good. The fourth round pick was good. Pärssinen, Nick and I were at the Garden last night. We were watching the game. Pärssinen was all right. De Haan was more than fine. Like he was like when Ryan Lindgren was on the ice, I was always nervous. With Calvin de Haan on the ice last night, I didn't have to worry. It was great. I had a great time.
That's kind of, and I said this exactly to you. That's what you want from someone like Calvin de Haan. If I don't notice you, that means you're having a good game. Because if you're a defensive first defenseman, typically speaking, you're going to be on your back foot a lot. You're going to have to be mitigating rush chances against, trying to break things up in passing lanes before they get down low, because you're not the most ambulatory skater. You're not the most agile skater. But you got a good stick, you got good positioning, you're tall, you got a good reach, you break up passing lanes. De Haan was perfectly fine last night. And the first real inflection point in this conversation, to pivot a little bit more, you brought up Pärssinen. You can add Berard to this. You could put Othman in here. You could even put Rempe in here. Part of the reason I understand being a little bit more bullish on their playoff prospects is purely because they got guys who are hungry and want a chance. And you've got that married to, you might have pissed off the veterans a little bit by trading away Vesey and Lindgren. So you got the combination of the young guys who just want to stay in the NHL and not go back to Hartford because the Wolfpack are terrible, and riding the bus in the AHL is a lot less satisfying than going to Nobu on a Tuesday on an off day. Like if we're talking about, do I have to get room service pizza in, I don't know, Lake Erie when we're playing the Lake Monsters versus I can go to Nobu tonight because we have 2 days off in a row. Very big difference in the landscape of things. It's a lot easier to post your bat signal on your Instagram story in New York City than it is out there in Lake Erie or in Coachella Valley when you're playing the Thunderbirds. It's a very different environment to be operating in. But when you have the combination of those two things, and we'll talk about the game last night in a little bit and the game against Toronto for that matter too, but you've got the veterans who probably are looking around like, what, they don't believe in us? They don't think we can do this? And look, is it stupid that professional athletes sometimes need that little bit of extra motivation kick in the butt? Yes, you would think that being competitive was kind of an inherent part of being professional, but it works. And then you combine that with the young guys who are desperate to just stay up. That's a good combination. So at the very least, you can talk me into them being hungry. You can talk me into, well, the veterans who have been underperforming all year kind of having a little bit of a kick in the butt. Panarin was really good in the first period last night. Zibanejad had a really nice game as well. And then you combine that with a bunch of young guys who just don't stop skating. Berard doesn't ever stop skating. Will Cooley doesn't ever stop skating. All of a sudden, you got a really nice combination of underperforming veterans who are kind of insulted, and you got hungry-ass young guys who just want to stay.
I mentioned this a couple of months ago, mostly as a joke, but this is kind of getting to that point of wait, maybe it's true of the is this team just the new version of the 2012 LA Kings, or they make it on the last day of the season? No one expects them to do anything, and then they just go to the playoffs and just dominate. Listen, I'm not huffing any hopium here or copium or whichever, or it's one of those things where I don't think it's going to happen. But the more this season goes along, and the more these storylines begin to add up of okay, Zibanejad's playing better lately, right? He drew, and we talked about this during the game. He drew 3 penalties. He was skating out there. He was playing better. The team looked way more engaged against Nashville. Now, we'll talk about this in a minute, but Nashville did not look engaged at all. So it was easier for the Rangers to be more engaged than the Predators. Sure, but the Rangers still had to be engaged at the end of the day. And they were, and they look good. So if they can continue that, massive, obviously, game 10 against your rival, the Islanders, who you just dumpstered, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, like, you now have to do it again. You have to get up for that. The storylines are here. The team is playing better. Like you said, the young guys are hungry. The veterans are probably pissed off because their friends are getting traded, and they don't want to get traded. There's still a lot of talent on paper, which is our favorite term here on the show, to go around. There's opportunity here for something to happen. What that could be is literally anybody's guess, because it very much depends on which version of this team wants to play the game on any given night. But given all of the ingredients, there is enough here to make an incredible dish. All that needs, like, a lot of things have to go well for that to happen. Will it happen? Probably not. The chances are low, but it's not zero. And by the day, like, the chances are slightly increasing. Again, not from like 0.5 to 35, but like 0.5 to like 1.2, 1.4, like, slow increases that, you kind of look around and you're like, you know what? Like, maybe I'm starting to see if there's a path out of this. In my head canon, the Rangers are 2012 LA Kings, and like, that's just the storyline that I'm creating in my head, and like, that's what I'm believing. But you start to see the parallels, and you think, okay, well, could it happen again? It's not probably won't, but I guess it could.
So with that in mind, I do want to finish off one last thought on the Lindgren, because like, the Lindgren trade is a perfect encapsulation of why people like Andrew and I get mad at teams and general managers, because we spent the entirety of last season pointing out that Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Trouba, Ryan Lindgren, outright net negatives on the team. And they kept Lindgren's minutes up. They rushed Trouba back from injury, and then Trouba said he wasn't hurt, even though he very clearly was. And they had to keep playing Barclay Goodrow over some of the more viable options, like a Johnny Brodzinski or Blake Wheeler or Matt Rempe or whomstever you want to say on that fourth line role. And you waited too long, and it's part of an overall profile of inconsistency. And that's what irks me, because the opportunity to greatly improve the team over the last year or two, if you just removed the net negatives, you would have had a lot more success than just adding, a Jack Roslovic or an Alex Wenberg. I like those pieces individually, but the net negatives of playing somebody like a Ryan Lindgren with Adam Fox for the last 3-4 years, not only did you hold back Adam Fox, you never got to see what K'Andre Miller could do in a first pair role when he was still kind of in a young and ascending period, as opposed to what he is now, where he very well might have plateaued. And, last night was a good encapsulation of that. He had the great goal off the rush chance, but then he and Borgen also just looked at each other as the Predators had 3 different net front chances. There was that one sequence I remember where JT Miller threw the puck to the middle of the ice to no one in particular. Nashville missed the net. Nashville regrouped, the Rangers tried to break out, and then Miller immediately turned it over again. So, like, you really get the full scope of the experience. And I think I said it going into the playoffs last year, Miller's a really good encapsulation of where the team is at, because most of the time, if K'Andre Miller's having a good game, the Rangers are probably going to win. And the inversion of that is true as well. If K'Andre Miller is struggling, that second pair is having a hard time, they're going to have a hard time most nights. And this is all part of a bigger conversation of just, you go through all of the transactions in your head, and it's maddeningly inconsistent, because like, this is good process of, you identified, if we keep him, the contract will not age well. It is more valuable for us to get that roster spot and put someone else in it and get draft picks back than it is to keep him in hopes of futilely making the playoffs and probably losing in the first round. This is also the same general manager who wouldn't trade as much as it took to get a Jake Gensel, to get a to get Jake Gensel last year, or to get a Jacob Chikrin 2 years ago, actual impactful moves based on the idea of, well, we need that next wave of guys, well, we need Brennan Othman, we need Gabriel Perreault. Well, by that time, Panarin's going to be 35, Kreider's going to be 35, Zibanejad will be 34, JT Miller, who's here now, will be 34. And sure, Gabriel Perreault is probably going to be a good top 6 NHLer, but by that point, you're going to need a whole new team.
Yeah.
That's why it's so frustrating at times, because these are obvious decisions. Coming into this year, you knew they weren't keeping Lindgren. You knew. And instead of, trying to reduce his role to get better production out of him, we just kept rolling him out there with Adam Fox over and over and over again. And I saw someone tweet this right before we went live. If you go and look on moneypuck.com right now, Miller and Fox still have the best expected goals rate in the entire NHL of any defensive pair with, I think, 100 minutes. And we haven't revisited that once since they traded for Will Borgen. So the process is what's maddening. The process is driving me crazy.
Yeah. And again, I go back to this because it's just such a weird quote from Peter Laviolette when asked a few weeks ago about changing the pairings, and he said the pairings were set, which didn't make any sense then, but it doubly doesn't make any sense now, especially because most of your defensive pairings are brand new.
Yeah,
with brand new faces and brand new, essentially a brand new structure. How could you turn? I understand Lindgren was still on the team at that point, but Borgen was new, Vakanainen was new. You have newer faces on this blue line. How can you turn around and tell reporters with a straight face that the pairings were set? That doesn't make any sense from a coaching perspective, nor a personnel perspective. Now that Lindgren isn't here, they are very much not set, because now you need Calvin de Haan in here. Now you got to shuffle the lines again. None of that made sense, and it just goes back to what you talked about a second ago, where you knew Lindgren was going to get out, Trouba was going to get out. All these guys were essentially dead men walking on this team for a while, and everyone kind of knew that, assumed that, kind of just waiting to see when that would ultimately happen. So if that's the case, then why not just fix things earlier? I know this is a wild statement to make, but if your ship is sinking, wouldn't you rather fix it earlier than later? Is that am I breaking news here? Is this a scorching hot take to make, that you knew these guys are out the door? Okay, well then, while they're still here, diminish their role, bring up guys that are going to essentially replace them in the lineup.
Oh, we'll talk about Zach Jones. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to Zach Jones here in a minute, but replace those guys with the players that will play in their stead once their trades are complete,
or find out if they can do it or not too.
Right,
that's another thing. Yeah,
it's just a lot of this doesn't make sense, and it goes back to what you were talking about with the timeline. Othman is by all accounts, from people that are smarter than me and know prospects a lot better than I do, supposedly Perreault is going to be incredible, and that's great. But he's a few years away from that happening in the NHL.
Even if he comes out when their season ends the first week of April and he plays 2-3 games as a Ranger, he's not getting it. Who's he playing over in the top 6?
Nobody.
You're telling me that a team that spent 4 years before they let Lafreniere play with Panarin is going to let the kid come right out of college to playing with Panarin or playing with Zibanejad?
You think they're going to move Zibanejad down?
Yeah,
play Gabe Perreault? Are we come on? It's just, we as much as we want these things to happen, we know this organization. You know the organization. We've been fans for long enough. We've seen the decision making.
It took
over
JT
the
Miller
course of
4 years to become an NHL regular. Chris Kreider took 4 or 5.
We've seen this time and time again, where the Rangers refuse to give young, promising players their ice time. And this will not change with Gabriel Perreault. For as much hype as he has around him, the Rangers played Colin Blackwell over Lafreniere in his rookie season, the number 1 overall pick. They're not giving Gabe Perreault more ice time than Kreider, Zibanejad, whomstever you want to add in there. It's not going to happen. He's going to play third line minutes, look really good for 8 minutes of ice time, and then they'll call it a day. That's what the Rangers do. That is their MO.
and building off of that a little bit more, like just when I evaluate or when I'm thinking about a decision maker, a general manager, a coach, an owner, I don't necessarily need to agree with what they're doing. That's not how life works. I'm never going to agree with what everything else someone else does. Can I at least understand the logic? Is there a through line I can trace through the decisions? And that's what irks me and infuriates me about Chris Drury is when he makes good decisions, he makes good decisions. He quickly realized Patrick Nemeth was not an NHL caliber defenseman after giving him that contract, and they burned 2 second-round picks to make him go away. Then to replace that problem, you brought in Ben Harper, who is also not good enough. And then you brought in Nico Mikkola, who could have been good enough, but you looked at him and said, well, we have other priorities. We would rather do Eric Gustafsson, which that worked out very well for you. And then you let Eric Gustafsson leave because he was going to get paid more to play more somewhere else. And you said, okay, well, this has got to be the Zach Jones year, right? And then he got all of 5 games. And for whatever reason, you decided you didn't really like what he was giving you in those games. And
he was really good last night, by the way.
Jones was really good. And he is never going to be, and this is the same argument I've been having all year with Oiler fans about Evan Bouchard, that Islander fans are having about Noah Dobson, Ranger fans are having about Adam Fox. That offense first archetype defenseman is never going to block a ton of shots. They are never going to throw a lot of big hits. They aren't going to win leverage battles in front of the net for positioning. They're not going to win a lot of 50-50 pucks below the goal line. The value of those guys is their ability to change the game state from defense to offense quickly and then augment offense in the offensive zone where they effectively function as a fourth forward, where their puck skills are good enough that they can contribute offensively to the degree that they're able to control plays significantly more. And
by the way, if the puck is always in the offensive zone, they don't have to defend. That's the beauty of having defensemen that are, 1, comfortable with the puck on their stick, and 2, know what to do with it, and 3, can, like you said, let's say the puck is in the defensive end. Their ability to create something out of nothing and counter quickly is such a massive component to being a blue liner in 2025. If you have that ability, then you don't have to play defense.
Nope.
Because your team is in the offensive zone the whole time. You don't have to throw hit. Again, the biggest thing that people have to understand, you do not hit the other team
if you don't
when you control the puck. You don't have to block shots when your team controls the puck. So if a defenseman doesn't do that, it doesn't automatically mean they're bad. Their skill set is, okay, what can I do to make sure the puck is in the offensive zone the entire time?
Or as much as possible. And that's really that's the trade-off,
Right.
How much offense can you create?
Sure. Within reason.
Obviously. Yeah, within reason. Yeah. That's the trade-off. And I understand that on a team like the Rangers, who have had an atrocious defense this year. I think they were 31st in expected goals against going into last night's game. And, the last night's game is a good example of why score impacts. And, I argued with people who watched the game after looking at the box score, because if someone didn't watch the game, they would think, oh, the Rangers got lucky. And then you would realize, oh, wait, Nashville had like 30 shots on goal in the third period long after the game was already over. And they kind of juiced the underlying numbers and had a puck. They had the puck a ton in the third period, but nothing.
Quick had a great game.
Quick was great last night. The one reach back save was really, really kind of crazy for, I wake up with lower back pain pretty much every day, and I'm not 39 years old. So for Jonathan Quick to be able to do that is still at his age is pretty impressive. But the one last thread on this before we start talking about the recent games and just the overall picture. I said last week, it kind of felt like the window of contention for this permutation of the team was closed, because this year, even if you make the playoffs, you're going to be a real long shot just to get to, the second round, let alone a deep playoff run. You think about where they're going to be next year and what they'll need. They'll have a decision to make on K'Andre Miller. They're going to need a new first pair left-handed defenseman. They probably need a top 6 forward or a third line center, depending what you do with Zibanejad. And then you probably need at least one more forward to just feel good about your group. Because as much as we like that combination of, Othman, Berard, Edstrom, Rempe, and Perreault, if he should declare, they're not going to roll 6 young guys in the bottom 6.
No
That's
way.
just not how the Rangers or the NHL at large largely works. So you probably need 2 bottom 6 guys to supplement what you already have. That's a lot in one offseason, and you need to get it right, too. You know, we've been here 4 years now waiting for the Rangers to find that first line right wing. It very well might be Zibanejad. We're looking for Adam Fox to get a real first pair defenseman to play with to maybe make him better as opposed to him needing to do everything. So there's a lot of moving parts to try and get right in a single offseason. You may or may not need to replace Jonathan Quick, who may retire after this season, though he very well could keep playing into next year. It's just a lot that needs to go right. And then everybody's a year older. You know, your 5 most expensive forwards are all 32 or older now. JT Miller's birthday was recently. He turned 32. And that's just a lot you need to go right. You know, last year we talked about a lot. Everything that could go right for the Rangers did. You know, they missed Adam Fox for the first month of the season, and Eric Gustafsson was a point-per-game defenseman for that first month, and it was great. And you lost Filipino for almost the full season. And it didn't really matter because your team was so good, your goaltending was good enough, and your power play was good enough that it didn't really matter. You didn't have any secondary scoring. You brought in some guys, and it went reasonably okay. You got the easiest first-round matchup in the history of this playoff format. You got to play a team that you sun every time you play them in the playoffs in Carolina, where, yeah, Carolina's a good regular season team, and then, you know, they see that Rangers logo, and they forget how to play hockey in the playoffs. You know, God bless Freddie Anderson, but yikes.
Yeah.
And that's really, and then this year has been the opposite. You know, everything that could go wrong for them this year has gone wrong for them. The vibes tanked almost immediately. They've been getting pretty average goaltending, which for the Rangers is bad. The power play has been slightly above average as opposed to great. The defense has been atrocious as opposed to bad. All of their stars are going to be 30 to 40% less on their point totals than last year. And you're still kind of hanging around, which is, you know, more of a testament to how bad the East is at large. But like, you kind of probably get closer to that middle ground next season where it won't be as bad as this year, but it won't be as good as it was 2 years ago. And that's kind of where they were 3 years ago, where they came in off the Tampa Bay season and had an okay regular season, but never felt great about it. That's probably what they're looking at next year, somewhere closer to